Welcome back, everyone, to That Is Effin' Weird. Make sure you're sitting down for this episode of Bigfoot. I am one of your hosts, Alex.
And I'm Tristan.
And we have a special guest on today who's going to help us dive into the world of Bigfoot. Brendon, thank you for coming on to the show.
You're welcome. It's a very complicated world, what we're about to discuss today. That's for sure.
I know. This is a big topic. I don't think we're going to be able to cover everything in one episode. So we might have like 2 or 3 of these, but we would love to have you come on and just, we'll pick your brain for the Bigfoot stuff.
It's a good thing. I'm very happy to be here, and it's not often that I'm usually on the other side of the microphone giving the interview. So it's kind of nice to be. I don't have to prepare as much. I just have to answer the questions as they come at me. So it's kind of nice.
Well, hopefully there's nothing too hard that we're going to be asking of you and everything, but we'll dive right into it. Yeah. I think one of the biggest questions that we have right now is what drove you to do research into Bigfoot?
Well, it's funny because I'm not really, if you'd see me and you'd meet me on the street, you would never guess that I was interested in such a thing as Bigfoot. I had grown up in the Catskill Mountains, and I'm a hunter and a fisherman and an outdoorsman. I used to be. I lived out on the West Coast for quite some time, and I traveled a lot for my old job. Coming back to the East Coast to look after my folks and to do some stuff around my hometown where I live, I got injured, and I had to have spinal surgery, so I was laid up for quite a while. And that being said, I wasn't able to, I'm not handicapped by any means, but I can't get around as much as I used to. So while I was recuperating, I started listening to creepypasta. I started listening to Bigfoot podcasts. I started reading books. And I was always fascinated by the people that are looking for Bigfoot, right? I mean, you have to admit that there's a cast of characters out there, right?
Oh yeah, 100%. Like you look at the Discovery Channel with what's that show called? Finding Bigfoot. They are a bunch of characters right there.
Yeah, I mean, you got that, and then and that's just the media side of it. I mean, if you look at the real deep dive into some of the Facebook groups and some of the people that are out there with some of the books, it's a cast of characters, and I wanted to document that, right? I wanted to start filming and documenting and starting a sort of a production company. So I founded the Catskill Appalachian Research Collective, which we are based on the East Coast. So it's focused in New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. So that's how I got interested into it. Is I wanted to start following a certain subset of people around and see what this whole Bigfoot thing was. One thing had led to another, and then we started doing our own little investigations, and then that led to a YouTube channel. And so it was a paradigm shift in the way, due to the injury, I had to kind of reinvent myself. And Bigfoot seemed like an interesting way to do that.
Now, has Bigfoot always been something that you were always passionate about? Or I guess, had that seed always been there? Because I know for me, at least, ever since I was growing up, like a little kid, I always heard stories. I remember I was probably 5, 6 years old the first time I heard of Bigfoot. And ever since then, I've always had the thought or the passion to research and just dive into the Bigfoot world. And now, was that always the case for you, or was it when all these things happened later in your life, that's when it really, the Bigfoot took over?
Well, I think anybody, I mean, I'm reading a great book right now. It's called, I got it actually right here. It's called Why People Believe in Weird Things, right? It's an actual book by Michael Shermer. It's an older book, and I think people are generally fascinated with the unknown and mysteries, whether it be Bigfoot and Sasquatch or UFOs or ghosts or missing 411. I think people are always, curious on they want to try to solve the puzzle. And so no, I wasn't always interested in Bigfoot, but I was always interested in, as a young boy and teenager, you're kind of interested in weird shit. So I guess Bigfoot is literally, and it's funny because we had started the group, and the group was going to be, when I started the CARC, it was going to be, okay, we're going to do 60% Bigfoot, we're going to do 40% spirits and ghosts and UFO. But I tell you, Once you let that, it literally Bigfoot is the 800-pound gorilla in the room, because once you start that conversation and you go down that rabbit hole, it's a deep hole. And it took us 2 years to kind of float back up to the top to where we can kind of get our bearings and start investigating other strange things. So yeah, it's been a weird road. Bigfoot kind of is the granddaddy of all mysteries, right? You think?
Hmm. I mean, yeah, and I would say so. It would have to be Bigfoot or UFOs, one of the two. I would say personally.
Now they may be related,
Yeah, okay. Oh, that's.
right?
I got a question about that for later on. I don't want to get into
I
that
know.
right now.
Yeah.
You said though that you did most of your research and everything like that in the East Coast. Has that always been the case, or have you gone across the United States, maybe some other countries, conducting your research into Bigfoot?
Me personally, no. But we have, like I said, when we started the collective, it's a group of like-minded individuals that are around the country, and we'll say North America, and we'll say United States primarily. Some people out in Western Canada, but no, it's been for my boots on the ground, because I am very new by Bigfoot standards. I mean, there's been some people that have been looking for the thing for 30, 40 years.
Yep.
My boots on the ground has been delegated to the northern part of upstate New York, the southern tier, which goes over towards Buffalo in Canada, and I'm sorry, Buffalo and Lake Erie, I think that is over there. My geography is awful. And then down through central Pennsylvania. So that's where we concentrate our. We just don't have the funds or the bandwidth to go all over the world.
No, that's understandable, and I hate that too, because almost kind of like what we're doing right here, like with the podcast, like we're all over the world right now doing this interview. I think it's a passion though that like everyone hopes to like you're passionate about Bigfoot to like fully one day just to like have the funds to go and do that, and like I'd say that's the hardest part about doing stuff that you really love is just like the funds and like the money to like actually go out and do it, because this stuff can get kind of expensive, whether it's just a
Amen.
hobby or like anything like that. So
Yeah, I mean, and that's why we started the collective, is we wanted to try to bring in other people from around the country. And by Facebook standards, we are not a big group. We have a little over 1,000 people in our group, which is to me, growing it. When you start a Facebook group from one member and you get to 1,000, that's a big benchmark, you know?
I was gonna say 1,000 people is not is not small by any means. To me,
That's
that's
still a
pretty.
lot of people.
I'm
Yeah.
right, exactly, and it's I'm the founder and the director. This is my baby. I LLC'd the group a couple years back when we started it, because I would like to brand this whole process, and because you look at I don't want to digress off the track too far, but if you look at network television is on the down, right? Everybody's streaming.
Hmm.
So what prevents me from creating my own network and then selling it to, say, Hulu or Netflix or something like that? So that's my golden ring right there, is to do that. And but that being said, you have to keep your eye on the prize. The Bigfoot stuff. You have to entertain everybody's thoughts and respect everybody's thoughts. And we just launched our YouTube channel a month and a half ago, and that's a whole nother process, as you guys, I'm sure you're well aware, that now that we've got the YouTube channel, which is CARC Universal, it's only less than 2 months old, and we've got 300 subscribers. But we've got this guy, and I think he's in Romania. He found the channel on his birthday. He's one of those guys, and you being overseas, you'll understand this. Is he watches all the footage, but then he'll respond in broken English comments, and he's very
Yep.
excited. So
Yep.
I have to, you have to, if you're going to run a Bigfoot organization, and I'm saying a smaller one, you have to maintain your hand on everything, right? You got to keep your real investigators. We have a board of trustees. You would say we have 4 or 5 people that do our real investigating, but then you have all these other people that are part of the collective, which isn't very important. And that is where, if we remember how I started the story, I wanted to chronicle a wide variety of people. So it's working out so far so good.
So you said that you had 4 to 5 actual researchers like out on the ground
Right.
trying to locate or find Bigfoot, correct?
Right. So what we do is we have there's a guy named Sean, there's a young lady named Gwen, there's Charlie, and then there's Mike, and they're all kind of, and then there's me. So there's the five. And what we do is they'll set up they'll set up the investigations on property around our central location, which is New York, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey, and then they'll do the pre-investigations. And then if there's some activity going on, I will go with my film. I'll go with me with an extra cameraman, and I'll document it, because I believe if you can't document what's going on, it's just a story.
Yeah. Oh yeah, 100%. And I think that's, if we look at like any sort of Bigfoot, UFO, like any sort of film, it's always just that small little bit that's ever captured. And it seems to me like there's not real, no, I'm not gonna say not real evidence, but there's like that process up to it is like it's not documented, and you only have that like that little snippet of information.
Well, and that's the thing, is it was a challenge, because we had gotten, we'll get to this probably farther down the interviews. We had captured some evidence, and but the time leading up to that is not really all that exciting. So to make that watchable and make that digestible, like you see on Expedition Bigfoot or Finding Bigfoot, that unfortunately is all scripted, right?
Oh
Because
yeah.
you guys are in the business, you understand that, it's, you want the jump scare is what you're waiting for, and that doesn't always come at all. And I've been very lucky to have a couple of instances that have happened relatively in a short amount of time, because there's people, like you said, that have been looking for this thing for 30 or 40 years and have nothing to show for it.
Hmm.
What keeps those people motivated? That's the bigger question.
I think almost you have to look at it too, almost like as almost like a police or like a detective like point of view, where like every little aspect that you're doing up into this investigation is important. It's important, I think, to document everything that you're doing in the event that you actually, capture or you gather that evidence. So that way it's like, oh, okay, this is what we did, X, Y, and Z. Now let's replicate that again and again and again. And then therefore you're collecting more evidence, you're getting more of the results that you're looking for. So I think it's a smart idea, and it's a good practice to document literally everything that you're doing. So I would be for it.
And that's also right there. You just said that that's your scientific theory, right? You want to be able
Yep.
to repeat the same steps and have it the repeatable offense, or the repeatable whatever happened, the evidence, if possible. Unfortunately, most of the time it's when you let your guard down for just a minute. You put the camera down for just a second. You shut the recorder off for just a minute, and that's when usually all the hell breaks loose. And that's, I've been caught with my pants down on that one time, one too many. Put it that
Yep.
way.
And that's just how technology is, though. Unless you have, like we talked about it before, the funding to keep those cameras recording 24/7, unlimited memory cards, like just like, like it takes a lot. So it's one of those things where, that's bound to happen. So that's like no fault of your own. But I can completely understand like it being frustrating to like, have something happen while the cameras are off, and then it just turns into a story and everything. So
Well, but then you also have groups like the Olympic Project out on the West Coast. I think they've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars and thousands of man hours, and really have very little to show for it. So I'm fairly lucky in that our budget is what it is. We can afford to buy what we have and use what we have, but I haven't spent the 6,000 hours in the woods yet. And I don't know if I would, to tell you the truth, to be honest with you.
yeah.
Yeah.
So a big question that I do have, like now that we're kind of like talking about the research that you're doing, what has been like the hardest part of all the research that you have been doing up to this point?
Well, to me, it's living on the East Coast has its challenges, because a lot of people think that there's not enough territory here on the East Coast, and there is a vast amount of territory that's public land, that's not that's deep forested, that's not developed by any means. But the hardest part for me, and at the level we are, is to get everybody on the same page because everybody has a day job and everybody has bills to pay. So not everybody can get away at the same time. And then when you get everybody away at the same time, not everybody is in the right. Got to get everybody on the same page. So trying to, I think the by far the hardest thing for me to do with my group is to treat it like a big money expedition
Hmm.
when it's not, right? You're trying to cover 30,000 acres in a weekend with 5 people. It's just not going to happen. And I mean, in thermal drones costs, we got a friend of ours who has a buddy, one of the guys in the group actually has a good friend, best friend who has like a $4,000 thermal drone. The problem with him owning a $4,000 thermal drone is he does not want to fly the $4,000 thermal drone.
What's the point of having it?
Thank you. Therein lies the argument. So these are challenges you have. It's like, you got it. It's great. You're launching it up there, and great. That's awesome. Let's get that thing up at night. No, I don't want to crash it into a tree. It's like, so though, and trust me, I've had these. These are,
No.
so these are the challenges, right? Because you want to do everything that these big budget productions are doing, but you can't afford to do them. I mean, if I had the money to invest in a $3,000 thermal drone, I would fly it and I would crash it and I would get another one. That's just the way life is, right? I mean, if you're going to find the thing, you're going to have to look for the thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
So again, that next question is: so what sort of instruments do you guys use when you're doing your research then in the field?
Well, we know it's not the thermal drone.
Yeah.
Jesus, sorry, Jim. Anyway, I'm a big fan of, it is people will watch a video that's got pretty shitty video, but it has to have great audio, right? You're not going to watch something that sounds awful. You might put up with a bad thermal or something like that. So for me personally, I've got some high-end lavalier mics. We got some high-end shotgun mics. I've got some low-light Sony cameras. We've got a bunch of GoPros. We've got a couple of handheld thermals, stuff like that. We generally, and of course, we have the trail cameras. We've got a half a dozen trail cameras. The main thing is you can put the technology there, so you can put a trail camera somewhere. But if you're not there to make sure that somebody's not screwing with the trail camera or trying to mess with you because they see where the trail camera is, you have to put people in the woods and you have to put people with cameras in the woods. And those people that go in the cameras with the woods have to know how to use those cameras,
Yep.
right? Because I've gotten back and I don't scream at my guys, but I tell them content, always be recording. I need everything. I need everything that you do. I've got 2 guys going down to central Pennsylvania this weekend, and it's been a mild summer or mild winter by all accords here. So there's not a lot of snow on the ground, so they can get out and look for stuff. But if they go down there and they don't record things that I can use, it's just, to me, it's like they didn't even go.
Yeah.
And to them, I'll have to be honest, I am the most skeptical person in our group by far, because I'm the one that watches all the evidence and I'm the one that puts it together and tries to put it into a product that people will watch.
Mhm.
I don't know and this may sound weird on the Bigfoot shows, I don't really care if we find Bigfoot or not. I mean, of course, I would love to in a perfect world, yes. But
Yeah.
it's important to chronicle the journey. That's the important part for me. To the other guys, they are very, very, they're more of that was Bigfoot. That must have been Bigfoot. They're still in that stage.
Yep.
They're not as deep as they were before, but they're still in that stage.
I think Tristan, he's probably our biggest skeptic on the show right now. He can kind of contest to that. Where, to me, I full-heartedly believe in Bigfoot. Like, you don't have to give me any sort of evidence. I already have enough. Like the stories, like everything up till now. Like, I believe in the thing. But Tristan's a little bit different way. So,
Well, let me ask you, Tristan. You've done let me ask you guys a question. Is Tristan? You guys have done more than your share of interviews. Have you? What percentage of people do you have on? And you don't need to say that it's just Bigfoot stories. That you as soon as the conversation starts, you go, "Oh, this guy's all in. No matter what we say, he's going to think it's a Bigfoot. Or no matter what, your skeptic button is just going off, right?" So how does that work? How has that been working on the interviews with you guys on your side?
Most of the interviews we've done, I can't really judge it off if they're a skeptic or not, because it's more been people talking about subjects they're aware of. When it comes to the theories surrounding that at the end, there's definitely, you can tell where people are going to stand pretty quickly.
Mhm.
Because most people reveal what they're gonna think like right off the bat, and most people aren't ashamed of that kind of thing. And yeah, just being an overly skeptical person of all of it, I tend to always look at the most non-fantastical point of view of it. But then as soon as like I'll use Dyatlov Pass for that, just because
Okay.
that part everyone decided that was Bigfoot like immediately, and to me that was the most ridiculous explanation of all of them. But everyone was just like, "It's Bigfoot." That's yeah.
Yep.
I mean, they even went through. There was a whole National Geographic where they had, I think it was National. Where they had fabricated a backstory behind the Dyatlov Pass, and they had acted it out like that was the real story. Was that there was this creature, and it was obviously a mockumentary. And I've got a guy on my team that wants to cover that on the show, and about Bigfoot. And I go, dude, you're like 4 years behind the ball here on this one, dude. You know? So I have to keep them. It's a challenge for me, and I'm sure, Tristan, you understand this. Is as the director, it's I don't want to take all the wind out of their sails, because then they're not going to go in there with excitement, and they're not going to go, like a first day at school kid going to the first day at school. But I'm trying to keep them grounded in being more skeptical. Don't believe what everybody tells you. Look at it through a filter where you can, so it's a challenge between keeping them motivated and letting them be excited about, yes, that's Bigfoot. Yes, that's going to be Bigfoot. And then also keeping them grounded at the same time. That's a real hard thing to do with these guys sometimes.
That's got to be really difficult to do with the type of groundwork you guys do. Because like I was thinking about when you're talking about field recording, because I love field recording audio stuff. That's so cool. But it's a hobby all of itself, like not just the going out there with being the audiophile and having the equipment. It's the going out there and like recording stuff and being out all day just in nature, not listening to anything else except for what's around you. Versus like kind of what we do is we're just sitting around talking, so you can kind of let people go off a little better, especially with stuff they think is fantastical, because then they just have fun and they kind of it's just more fun to listen to. But trying to keep people's motivation high while they're just standing out in the woods with cameras,
it's tough, and that's
got to not be easy.
It's funny that you said that, because we have one guy that is very high strung, and he's the youngest guy in the group. He'll probably listen to this and he'll know exactly who I'm talking about. He's a great guy. I love the guy to death. But the problem with him is I can't give him a camera or anything or phone, because he's so excited. He just goes. But I put a guy with him to follow him and shadow him, and he's got to slow down and let the guy catch up to him, right? So he's going out, he's barreling out in the woods at 3:00 in the morning or whenever it is, and he's got a guy behind him with camera gear. He's got to slow down and let the guy follow him.
Yeah.
It's not a race. So if you watch the footage, if you watch the raw takes of all the stuff I got, you always hear me go, Mike, it's not a race. Have fun. It's not a race. Don't let Derek get lost.
To me, what it seems like is, I don't know if you've ever seen the TV show. It's called Taps. It's a paranormal investigative type show, and their big concept behind the show was always, rather than like, okay, yep, your house is haunted and all this stuff, they would go at it as to try to explain all of the paranormal activity that was going on in any of the residents that they were in. And it was really nice, and it was like almost like a refreshing thing to see, where it was like, someone thought there was like something in the attic. Well, it turns out it was just some of the piping and air ducts where they were like squeaking, or it was really weird. So to me, that almost seems like your kind of approach, where it's like, yes, you want to believe, or like, you do believe, but you're going at it in a very, like logical, okay, hey, that wasn't Bigfoot just because it sounded weird. Let's try to get to the bottom of what it really was. And I think that's great.
Yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm a skeptic, and I'm of course I want the thing to exist. My take on it has definitely shifted. My thinking has shifted the more I talk to people about it with the shows, and the more books I read, the more stuff I cover. My paradigm has shifted a little bit in my thinking of it, because just the way things are. But I do agree with that. What I did with on our YouTube channels, I started it's called 3-minute videos, and they're around 3 minutes plus or minus a couple seconds. And what I do is I take a fairly popular Bigfoot video or suspected Bigfoot video, something that's relatively new, and I'll try to debunk it in 3 minutes or less. And I've only done
Oh.
4 episodes, and they've gotten a huge following on that. And what I do is I place like a common, like say there's one where it's a suspected, or the post is new Bigfoot video, blah blah blah, and I take it and I put overlay a bear into the same spot, and I show them that it's obviously not through photo recognition. You're looking at stuff, because how do you debunk something in 3 minutes or less? It's very hard to do, because the attention span on YouTube is minute. So that's something
Oh,
I just
yeah.
started.
That's why I love it.
Yeah, and right. That's something we just started. I started a couple months ago, and I've had a huge success with that. And that's so I'm challenged with delivering that type of debunking in a short amount of time. So yeah, I'm trying to do that and trying to put it into something that people can relate with. But if somebody sees it and they think it's Bigfoot, there's nothing you can tell them. There's nothing you can do or say to get them to think otherwise sometimes.
Okay, so I have a question with what you're saying based off the YouTube channel. Has AI recognition changed anything in the Bigfoot hunt? I hadn't really thought about that till you had mentioned like computers recognizing that. Is there any sort of like analysis done in that way on any of the footage?
Well, obviously there's been I mean, as far as facial recognition?
Yeah, kind of like trying to recognize what it is, place it like directly into like it's a man in a suit, or any kind of algorithms that were like formed around trying to figure out what it is.
I'm sure there are. I know that there's obviously spectral analysis when it comes to audio that you can look at a lot more in depth. I know that I've seen some videos on Thinker Thunker has done one with the Todd Standing where he laid over, but he had to do it himself. I don't have access to, first of all, enough video of Bigfoot's face, and second of all, I think that program is pretty expensive by the U.S. government. But I guarantee you, I can tell you, we all know that technology has changed both the hunt for it, and it's also the biggest roadblock, because now people can hoax stuff much easier than they could before. I mean, that's what makes the Patterson Gimlin film so unique, is that was filmed in the late 60s before CGI, before
Yep.
a lot of technology came to bear, and it still holds its own. So it's both a blessing and a curse.
Well, since you brought up the topic, what are your thoughts on the film? Very first footage.
Yeah, I love I don't know if you've ever watched the Joe Rogan show when he had Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum on. It was about a 3.5-hour show, and it was so funny because Joe was going back and forth. I think it's Bigfoot. Oh, now it's a man in a suit. I think it's Bigfoot. Now it looks like Bigfoot. Now it's a man in a suit. There's been a lot smarter people looking into that than I have, and they've spent far more money into it. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that it probably is, but
Okay.
but
But
if these two guys were able to capture that footage, right? And they shook it up, right? Remember the original camera was all shaky, the original footage, and then stabilization came along 5 or 10 years ago, and then the 4K version came along 5 or 10 years ago. So let me ask you this: if they were hoaxing it, right? Chances are they're either extremely lucky by getting away with it and lying for the last 55, 56 years, or it's a real thing, because I don't think they ever, back in 68 or 67, whenever it was, I forget the exact year. I'm probably going to be crucified on every Bigfoot. Oh, you remember the date of the Patterson film? So they didn't plan on it being put under the microscope as much as it has been, and it still holds its own. I mean, what do you guys think?
so there's actually someone you're talking about the video stabilization. Someone on Reddit, it was just a random video that I stumbled across, but they had taken all the shake out of it, and it was smooth, completely smooth, as if like it was like perfectly set up on a tripod filming this. And it looked to me, it looked like a man in a suit. I'm not gonna lie.
I'm staring.
It,
I'm
it,
staring at the picture on your Discord right now.
Okay. That was from a different interview that we had done a week back or whatever. So
So it looks
that
like
was
a
from
man
a
in a suit. You say it's a man in a suit.
let me take a look at it.
You're
Let
gonna
me take a
change your mind.
look.
That's the thing about it,
Uh,
is if you look at one time, I mean, I remember the first time I watched the 4K version, and I watched it on my phone. I go, "That's a fucking man in a suit, man. Come on, you could see the goddamn, and then you look at it again, I know what it is."
it's just like, am I in here? All right. Okay. I don't know. Okay. I will say this. I don't know. It is very, I could,
He's like, this is
almost like what you're
existence.
saying with the Joe Rogan thing.
Exactly,
It
right?
could be,
It's exactly the same thing.
yes. But like, here's the thing is that to me, there's so many different, like the variants, I guess, or like the face or like the head. It always looks different in almost every single picture of Bigfoot, or like it, like so, like the Patterson Gimlin one. It's I don't know. It's like the shape of the head to me is different than some of the other ones, like recently that have been found. Um,
That
the fact, like I don't know. It's just it's hard to say. I
That's
don't
the
know.
hardest thing. That's another thing about this search is everybody has a different opinion of what it looks like, and everybody has different evidence of what it looks like. You know,
Yep.
I mean, it's just
Yeah.
there's no, there's no um, consensus of it all looks exactly the same. Because I've seen some footage of something that looks more like a monkey.
But I mean, like yeah. Well, you look at, or well, let's take monkeys for example. There's different kinds of monkeys. Like you have the orangutan, you have like chimpanzee, spider monkey. They all look different, but they're all
Right.
primates. So if Bigfoot, like if that is its own classification of whatever type of mammal it really is, there could be different variants of it, and that's just like the one that they had captured that day. Whereas other ones that are being captured now, we're just catching a different one or a different variant of it, I guess.
I have the biggest problem. You want to know what the biggest problem I have is with all this thing is, and I'm sure you guys will. Some of you will agree with me that if that's the case, right? If there's several different species, which I can completely concur with that. I completely agree with you. They Where is a body?
So my thing is too with that is that if Bigfoot, like as a species, is an endangered species, well, let's just take this for example. Walking out in the woods, there are deer. Like because I grew up in Minnesota, deer are just there's a millions of deer up north. Um, I probably only stumbled across like an actual deer carcass, maybe 10 times at most my entire life, growing up from like, just a kid in diapers all the way up to like where I graduated high school is like I never saw just a random deer carcass just in the middle of the woods. So like the fact that like, Bigfoot carcass, if they are endangered and there's not as many of them, I could see that not being, you know, out there, especially if it's a creature that doesn't like to be around humans and wants to be like in its own little place doing its own little thing. We're probably not going to find its remains.
Well, I think that's a large argument that the flesh and blood. We'll call them the apers, right? There's two camps, right? There's two camps and two slangs. There's the flesh and blood guys that are called the apers, and then there's the paranormal guys that are the woo guys, right? They hate each other.
This is the first time I've ever heard of this.
You've never heard of that?
No.
That is so that are the two camps. There's the flesh and blood theory, which is a monkey in the woods, and their derogatory term called by the paranormal people are the apers, and then the paranormal people are the woo people, and and that's the biggest argument by the apers is that it's an apex predator, and it's like a bear, and it can die where it dies. It can do that, right? Because bears die in the woods. They choose where they're going to die, and they die. That being said, you would think that one would have been hit by a truck somewhere at some time because you hear stories about them being almost hit by cars all the time. But I mean, the Canadian highway is a really dark place and trucks do 80, 90 miles an hour up there. And the same thing in the flats of Montana. So I agree with you that, yes, it can choose where to die, but you would think that there would be a roadkill because I live in we have deer all over the place. But during rut, right, when the deer go into to mate and they go into rut, there's dead carcasses all over the place because the deer they're thinking with their junk and as they run across the street. And Bigfoot, if they procreate, they're probably doing the same thing.
That's a good argument. That's like, but that's the thing is like we have yet to hit like there's like a trucker has not hit one yet. So, which is I mean, disappointing, but a good thing in the same
And
token.
that's the
So,
whole thing is that there's that whole kill camp now. It's like if you ever want to stir the pot with anybody, just tell them you'd shoot a Bigfoot. I would gladly harvest a Bigfoot because if it is a flesh and blood creature, it would need protection, right? And you're not going to get protection from any government agency unless you have a body. And I think Dr. Grover Krantz said it the best when he stated that not only would you have to kill the thing, but you would have to drag it from university to university and shove it under the noses of the professors, prove that that exists.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah, no, that is very true because it's unless there's an actual physical body, people aren't going to. And here's the crazy thing too is that we were talking about like technology and CGI and everything like that. Even if you had pictures of it, even if you had like the best, clearest picture of a Bigfoot, and you're like, "Here, look at this right here," people would still doubt it.
right,
People, 100%.
right, of course. I mean, I
I
would,
wouldn't believe it.
unless
Shut up, Tristan. So, is there any sort of protection that you actually do bring out into the woods and like when you're actually doing your research? Because like you were saying that if like you encountered it and everything like that, would you kill it, or I guess would you protect yourself, or is it one of these things where it's like, no, don't harm it, we need to keep it alive?
well, it's funny because I first of all, I believe that the thing is probably would retreat, right? It wouldn't. You've never really heard, or I haven't really heard too many credible stories of Bigfoot attacking people, for vengeance or whatever. That being said, if you're going in the woods at night, you should always bring something to protect yourself because there are real creatures out there that do exist and that will hurt you. On the West Coast, by no means, you got mountain lions who you won't, you don't have that on the East Coast. But I mean, I always used to carry a rifle. There's usually a rifle in the truck or a pistol, or a shotgun. Just I'm not running around the woods with it, but it's in the vehicle.
Yeah.
Because to be honest with you, the most dangerous thing you could run into in the woods is another person. There's some
True.
weirdos out there. And that's that. Well, that's that movie. I think it's Sasquatch. It came out on Hulu. Was based on there was 3 unsolved murders that were in this area up by the Golden Triangle where they grew all the pot and all the the Mexican mafia. The mafia was growing all the pot and they had killed these trespassers. And what they did is they blamed it on Bigfoot and they claimed that it was a Bigfoot that was terrorizing the area and killing these people when in fact it was the cartel, the marijuana cartel.
I watched that documentary and like I wanted that to be like a 10 season, like documentary. Like I didn't want that. Like I was so disappointed that it was like what, 3 episodes, 3 or 4 episodes.
But you know what? To the directors and the writers, a testament. They got out while the getting was good. I mean, it was very well done.
Oh yeah, it really was. Cause like the entire time you weren't sure if there was actually like a Sasquatch or if it was actually just people killing other people up in the California fucking
Golden
what was it
Triangle,
called? Yep,
Golden
yep.
Triangle, yeah.
As far as like collecting and like doing your research and everything, has there been any sort of samples that you've collected or anything like that as far as whether it be hair, video, audio, anything like that that you feel is pretty strong evidence?
Well, we're shooting a mini documentary. It's called Devil's Road, and it's the concept of my group looking for Bigfoot, and eventually it'll be other phenomena. But we have to finish our first couple episodes. We were up in the Allegheny National Forest in 2020, which is northern Pennsylvania, where Pennsylvania and New York meet on the northern border. It's a giant forest. And we were out in a fire road in the middle of nowhere, about 15 miles from any type of populace, and it's very sparsely populated up there anyway. And around 3:30 in the morning, we had gotten this howl that I literally and I'm a big guy. I mean, I'm 6'4", well over 300 pounds, and to tell you the truth, this is one of those moments where I had put the camera down because it was raining and I didn't want to get the camera wet. I've got a very expensive low light camera that we use for stuff like that because we don't put any lights. So we had a group up on north of us, and we had me and another guy were on a fire road, and we were there the first night, and a couple other members were on their way up because they had to work Friday. So this was a Friday night, and it was about, we went in around 9:30 at night, and it was about 3:15. We had this huge howl, came out of freaking nowhere. Luckily, we had a little recorder on the truck that was rolling, and we had captured it, and I captured the whole moment up to that, and we had it vetted by a gentleman called David Ellis, who's out in the Olympic Peninsula in Washington State, who is kind of the, if there is such a thing as an audio expert when it comes to suspected Bigfoot calls, he's the guy, because it wasn't anything that I expected to hear in the woods. It sounded like a giant, at first it sounded like a giant wolf, like a really, and it was maybe no more than 50 to 75 yards away from where we were, but it sounded much bigger, like really, really, really freaking big.
Holy cow. I was expecting you to be like, oh, it was like a mile or two
No,
away.
it was not that far. And I actually, if you watch, if I'll send you the link, it's Devil's Road. It's called the Sugar Run Howls. And I chronicled, we recorded it all. I have such a time hard saying chronicled.
It's fine. We can't pronounce shit anyways on this show too. Don't worry about it.
And then I took it and I dressed it up. So it's a 15-minute video that it took me 500 hours to edit. I mean, I did like the Hollywood edit on it, and I had to edit the subtitles and all this cool stuff, and the videograms and all the black the thermal camera stuff and everything. So it takes you into this journey of this howl, and then the howls lasted like 15 fucking minutes. They were back and forth. There was two of them. And it's all on tape. I have it all on tape, and it's on our channel, but I'll send you the link. That is the one that now, was it Bigfoot? I don't know, because I did send it to the Fish and Game in Pennsylvania State, and I asked them I thought it was a wolf, right? And they're like, well, there's no wolves here. But I thought it was you'd have to hear it to understand how big it sounds. I got a brick road there, a brick wall there. They didn't get back to me. It took me a while to get David to listen to it. He's like, yes, that's the exact same things that we hear out here on the West Coast that we've attributed to a Sasquatch area. So that being said, and that night, what's frustrating is it was raining that night. So you have to hear the rain, and there was a storm coming in. The storm blew through the next day. We went out the next night. It was crystal clear. You could hear a pin drop. Nothing happened.
That's crazy.
No, but it's really, I'm very proud of the episode, and I'll share it with you guys. I'll send it to you, and I'll share it. Maybe you can put the link in the description or something.
Oh yeah, please do. And for all of our listeners out there too, we'll definitely put that link in the description and everything like that, so everyone can take a listen to it. So would you say that was the closest encounter that you've had so far?
By far.
By far. Okay. Yeah.
The other guys in the group have had suspected sightings, but they've always been from afar. I'm not a big tree knocker guy. I don't believe that Bigfoot walks around the woods with a stick waiting for people to hit a tree.
Yeah.
I really just don't buy that one. But people have heard wood knocks and stuff like that. I have a certain level of evidence that I'm willing to accept as possible evidence, and wood knocking to me is just not one of them.
That's interesting. I think I haven't heard of wood knocking before. Can you describe that as far as like what that means?
Well, there's a theory that Bigfoot communicate with each other over long distances, either by knocking on trees with sticks or by cupping their mouth and popping like a pop, And so what people will do is we've got one of the guys that will walk around with an axe handle, no axe on it, and he'll bang or a baseball bat and bang the tree, and allegedly people get replies from a suspected Bigfoot. I don't know where that came from, as far as a theory, but that is a very popular theory amongst several researchers.
Now, is there any other animal, or is there any other creature that would bang on trees or like knock on trees or anything like that?
I mean, like a woodpecker?
Man, well, maybe not, because I don't think you could hear a woodpecker from like miles away.
Well, there's some big woodpeckers, but no, not miles away, but there are some big woodpeckers. I do think that trees creak on their own with the wind, and stuff like that. Each person is different. If put it this way, it would have to be extenuating circumstances. Let's say that I would put myself in the same spot that we were when I caught the sugar on house. I was by myself, nobody else was with me, and I did 2 knocks, and then I got 2 knocks back, and then I did 1 knock, got 1 knock back, and then 2 knocks and 2 knocks back. Then I would have to think that it's either a person or, right? So you can't just knock on something once and then by happenstance get a knock back and go, oh, that's Bigfoot. I mean, that's as far
Yeah.
from a scientific theory as humanly possible.
Yeah, no, and that's true. I think that's a good way to look at it too. Is like, okay, if they communicate through knocks, there has to be some sort of like what you were saying, like you do 2 knocks, you get 2 knocks back, vice versa, everything like that.
Right.
I guess it just for me, like the whole wood knocking thing, it to me almost like what you were saying, it could just trees creak,
Exactly.
you know, like
Right.
so like to me I think that one's a little bit harder for me to like,
Well, that's the thing is that, the community is so mired in bad theories, and that's why being involved in it and trying to rise above, and that's why it's led me to think, and I don't want to sound like by any means I do not have a tinfoil hat on, but it's like when I started this, I thought maybe if it does exist, then maybe it is a big ape. Maybe it's just hasn't been found. But the longer you hear, the more you do the research, and the longer you listen to the conversations, and the more people you talk to, it leads me to believe that there might be just something a little bit more to this than maybe we know at all. As far as maybe it's not as flesh and blood as we think. I would tend to believe now because for lack of credible evidence.
okay, well let's get into this question right here. Where do you think Bigfoot derives from? Because I mean, we kind of talked about this at the beginning of the show, and I'll tell you my theory in just a bit. But as far as you, where do you think like the creature derived from? I guess like was it like a missing like the missing link type deal?
Well, I mean, okay, let's use the word if a lot, all right? Because I'm a skeptic. So let's say if it exists, right? Tristan, are we okay with that? Am I covering myself with that one right there?
I'm okay with that. Yeah.
Okay, good. We got to stick together. If it exists, I don't think it's a member of what they call Gigantopithecus, right? I don't think it came across the land bridge. I don't think it's a monkey. So it either doesn't exist and it's a figment of everybody's imagination, which I don't think is possible, or I think there might be something a little bit more paranormal to it. So I think that it may be, it's just, I have such a hard time hearing myself say some of this stuff out loud. But if it does exist, I think it has something to do with the current UFO phenomena.
Yes.
We lost Alex. It's over.
I am 100% on board with that theory. That is 100% what I believe is that the UFO phenomena or like the UFO, and Bigfoot connection, it's there because if you look at most of the encounters with Bigfoot, there's always UFO like not articles, but like reports of UFOs within the same time frame or along the same area as these Bigfoots. And there's a great book. It's called Skinwalker Ranch. I think it's called Hunt for the Skinwalker or Skinwalker Ranch. I can't remember the exact name of it, but it talks about that where the owners of what ranch is it?
It's called Skinwalker Ranch.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm an idiot. It's late here.
I know.
But yes, it's they had so many UFO sightings there, and they also had Bigfoot sightings as well. And it's just like to me that makes the most sense because you look at where like we don't like what you were saying before. There's no body. We haven't had one of those. So if it is a UFO like scout, observer, pet, whatever you want to call it, it could be one of these things where UFO drops off the Bigfoot. He does his thing. He walks around, does whatever he needs to do, and the UFO like beams him back up. I believe that 100%.
Yeah, I don't know if I believe all of that. It's just that I have to find if I have to find, I'm searching for an alternative to it being flesh and blood, and that leaves you a very narrow range of possibilities. Either it doesn't exist, or I mean, I have a hard. I think and with the research I've done, I think there's well over 35 million trail cameras that use in the United States alone. 35 million, right? And there hasn't been any. I mean, you get your share of alleged photos, but there hasn't been anything that you go, even if it's fake, or even if it's not Bigfoot, that's a pretty impressive picture of something that may not be Bigfoot. I'm not talking about somebody walking past, but let's ask the skeptic in the group what he thinks it is.
Yeah, Tristan.
And let's just say if it exists. So you have to use the same qualifier that I used.
So, basically, what I think is there's a large barrier of hoaxes in there. So I think you need to get over that.
Mm-hmm.
So if you accept that there's a certain amount of obviously fake things, but that still leaves a percentage of things that can't be explained. I've said it a million times. I think a lot of it has to just do with how our brains interpret the world, especially when we're confused or when we're scared.
Mm-hmm.
And people see all kinds of things that they just don't understand. So I think it leads into the paranormal aspect, but I mean that more broadly in the fact there's just a lot of things about our universe we don't understand.
Right.
And there's a lot of things about nature we don't understand.
Right.
Not to mention the fact our ears, especially. I think the big one is the ears, because I think when people hear things, it can make them see things a lot more, because your brain's much more tuned into using audio than visual a lot of the time, at least for when it triggers like a fight or flight response. So I think people hear things out in nature, and then it kind of tricks them into seeing things. And I think there is something weird going on out there, but I think it more has to do with our limited perception of the world than it does like aliens hanging out and like letting their pet go to the bathroom on Earth, like that kind of thing. I think it's a lot more complicated than is able to be answered simply, and we just have such a fraction of the information that you're really just shooting in the dark here.
Right. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. There was a great documentary, I think it's called What the Bleep Do We Know? I don't know if you've ever watched it. It's Tristan, it would be perfect for you. It's a theoretical physics and stuff like that. It's a true fact, though, is when Columbus landed in the West Indies, or the Spanish landed on somewhere in the West Indies. This is prior to Spanish colonization in the United States. The Indians had no concept of what a clipper ship looked like, right? They had no concept of a giant sail ship, that they didn't even see it. Their brain, because brains work, we recognize patterns, right? We fall back on our memory to things that we are trained, right? We know that D comes after C because it's a pattern, right? A, B, C, D. We're taught patterns our entire lives. So if you are, the Indians did not even understand where these people were coming from, because they had nothing in their brain to fall back to give them an idea that men traveled over sea on a boat like that big. It took them like 3 or 4 years, I think, or 3 or 4 days. The shaman was watching the men come ashore, and he finally was able to realize that they were coming off this ship. And then he related that to the tribe, and then the tribe understood that they traveled across sea. But it was such a foreign thought to these people, these simple people, that their brains could not wrap around the idea, because they had there was no pattern there. I think a lot of that might have to do with the Bigfoot phenomenon as well.
And connecting on the pattern thing, there's also that theory that, I forget specifically what it's called, but basically things from the ancient world of humans are like collective memory kind of passed down, and a lot of it has to do with fear. That's why you're like inherently scared of spiders and snakes and things like that, like even babies are, just because that's a genetic thing that was passed down as this collective fear. And, in early human history, there's a lot of different animals and things that existed that don't exist now. And I mean, there's definitely evidence of a lot of it, but a lot of them also were, bigger and more violent looking than probably we have today. So if your brain is already like looking for that inherently, just from, thousands and hundreds of thousands of years really of being scared of these things, I just think your brain is looking to find it. And, it's people that see Bigfoot a lot of the times, I feel like, not all the time, but I feel like a good percentage of it, somewhere in them, they were wanting to believe anyway, versus like someone like me, if I went out to the woods, it'd be a lot harder for me to have any sort of sighting because I'm not tuned in to look for it.
And you don't have your Bigfoot filter turned on, because that happens a lot. is a lot of people will go into the woods. They'll go into woods that have oak trees, and then an acorn will fall, and suddenly Bigfoot's throwing rocks at them or pebbles at them. I mean, it's like you have
Exactly. Yeah.
and that's true. I mean, that happens a lot, unfortunately. But yeah, so I would think, as far as if we're talking about expanding just what Tristan was talking about, is I think if you have 100 sightings, I would say 95 are misidentification, right? Probably a bear or something
Yeah.
else,
It's reasonable.
or or pareidoia, something like that. And then the rest would be there'd be a hoax, and then maybe 1/2 of 1% might be the real thing.
Yeah,
I don't think.
I would agree.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of Bigfoot fans out there. I think people go out, and I know people pay good money to go on Bigfoot expeditions with the filter on that everything they see and hear is Bigfoot. That's very difficult because they're very sensitive. These people are very hypersensitive. That if you shoot down, obviously it's not footage or it's not Bigfoot, but if you shoot it down in the wrong way, if you use the wrong vernacular, these people just curl up and just get so upset. And it's very. I did not think that the community would be as complicated as it is. It is a very complicated community, but that's also makes for a better story to tell about different characters along the way.
Agreed.
We're getting into
And
the psychological side of it. People are going, oh, they're going to talk about the monkey running around the woods.
I like that. I like the psychological part a lot more.
Yeah.
Especially with the echo chamber effect that kind of happens with people in communities like that, where like you get a lot of people together, which collectively that gives you more resources to accomplish a lot more. And in certain instances, that can do a lot. But also, what can happen is they can start kind of like hyper focusing on one thing, and then they just echo it, and then there's no like they can't be skeptical about anything because it's going to get shut down pretty quickly. I don't know. I find that part really fascinating about groups like that. It can be hard to have objective discussion sometimes when there's too many people kind of echoing off each other.
And that's one of the biggest pitfalls too with research, right? It's as I know that we want to expand our research group, right? We want to bring more people, more qualified people into the woods. But that being said, it is very, very hard to bring people in that you have to vet them, and you don't know. Are we bringing too many believers into the woods and not enough skeptics? Are we bringing too many skeptics into the woods and not enough believers? It's a very fine line to try to push the ball forward, and I think that's why. It has been nothing new has come from the conversation since the Patterson Gimlin film. If you really think about it, there has been no leaps and bounds, nothing.
what do you think would have to like? What would be, I guess, the next like big thing? Because I mean, you have like the footprints, and you have like the howls and everything like that. But again, you're right. There's like real no big leap. What do you think that leap would have to be?
It would
In
have
the
to be a
terms of,
body.
like,
It would have to be a body. It would have to be a body or a body part, like a finger or a leg or an arm or something like that. It would have to be something that that satisfies science, right? They will not. Nothing will ever. This will continue on till the sun burns out, unless a body is found. It will never progress.
well, I guess there has been hair samples taken that it's like an unknown like creature or animal, right? There's been that piece at least.
There's been a
Because
lot
I'm
of that. There's been a lot of
yeah.
suspected scat. There's been a lot of suspected hairs. But if you don't have something to compare it against, it's just circumstantial evidence. I mean, I have Todd Dishotel is he's a friend of mine or an acquaintance, and he taught at NYU. I think he taught at MIT. I think he teaches at UMass Amherst now, and he's into DNA sequencing, right? Into to stuff like that, and he welcomes anybody to bring him anything of any circumstance, right? There is eDNA, which we can use, which is if you test a water source, maybe you might find, but until you have something to compare it against, right? It's really just random DNA samples that may or may not be Bigfoot related. Unfortunately, I mean, I know sometimes when I talk to people that are believers, you can almost see their tears in their eyes because you're not going to wear down the stone here because just because you want it to exist doesn't mean it exists.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's
It's heartbreaking.
And that's I think it is. And I think too the fact that like you were saying like that next piece of evidence has to be um like some sort of like hand or foot, just like or just something, a bone even. That's gonna
Now there's
it may be a while before we get something like that.
and there have been claims, right? There's always claims of people having something like that somewhere. But if you're going to have it, right? If let's say I find a Bigfoot body, right? Tomorrow I go out and I find a Bigfoot body and I put it in my freezer and I say I got it, but I'm not going to show it to anybody. That doesn't do anybody any good. I might as well have a side of roast beef in the freezer, a side of ham in the freezer. The same thing. If I'm not willing to give it to science and let them have it, right, with the contingency that I'll get it back, right? There's been claims of that where people have handed over stuff. Claims again, we're talking here. That is, there's been claims of I handed it over and it disappeared. I had it and it's gone now. So if you're not willing to share the evidence, and that's why with the collective, because there's a lot of nitpicking out there. There's a lot, and I'm not saying every group, but there's a lot of groups that protect their evidence. It's my evidence. It's I'm not going to share it with you guys. It's ours. We're going to find Bigfoot. We're going to be the worst thing that could happen to the person like that is that Bigfoot is discovered, because what happens next is once Bigfoot is proved to be a real flesh and blood studyable creature, all the armchair researchers are done because all the heavyweights will come in, right? All the universities, all the grants, all the funding, all the National Geographic, all the heavyweight scientists will start to investigate this phenomena and this species, and the people that were there in the beginning, like the BFRO, will be ignored. They'll be pushed to the side. So the worst thing that they want to happen is the last thing that they want to happen is to have the thing discovered, if that makes sense.
Yeah, true.
And I have a bit of a theory or an idea of also why bodies may not have been discovered of Bigfoot. What I've come across is that the Bigfoot are actually like intelligent creatures, and they've been here for either as long as or possibly longer than us humans have. And maybe they understand that like if a body was to be discovered, like y'all said, it would be chaos, it'd be havoc. Like everybody that was skeptical now have to agree, okay, it's real. Everybody that's been saying it for years will come out and say, I told you so. And maybe Bigfoot, like as a species, they understand that humans can be a bit, I want to say, aggressive towards anything that's proven to be as sentient as we are, if not more sentient. It could be this whole problem of like, maybe Bigfoot have teleportation technology, and that's why they can be here one day and then be gone the next, or that's why nobody's been found, because if ever anything happens to them, they leave out or they, take the body with them. And maybe they recognize that humans are just prone to basically discovering these same advances and destroying the planet that they reside on, just like we do.
No, Leo. No, it's UFOs. It's UFOs and Bigfoot.
But
All
what
right.
if Bigfoots are the pilots of these UFOs? That's
No,
their
but
transportation.
look what we did with the buffalo, right? Well, look what we did with the North American buffalo. We almost hunted that thing out of existence.
Exactly. And I think that's
Right.
what Bigfoot, like, because they've been here and they understand that, like, oh man, these humans are violent. They've gone to war at each other, almost wiped out entire species. And we don't want that to happen to us. So it's like, we're going to stay out of sight. They could take pictures.
That is a brilliant point of view. Honestly, is that they are smart enough to stay away because they realize that Bigfoot. Look what happened to the Native Americans when the Spanish landed, right?
Exactly. And who's to say
Smallpox,
that
and
the
they wiped
natives
out.
aren't in communication with them as well to say, hey, stay out of it, stay away from them. And even looking at like wild animals, or dogs or cats that have been abused by humans, they tend to steer away or get aggressive themselves in a means of defense. So it's like, even if Bigfoot isn't as intelligent, but it's still a wild animal, doesn't mean that they still won't do their best to avoid humans because of, maybe past encounters or just what they've seen, how they treat other animals, even of, all the animals losing their homes and stuff. Maybe they understand that too, as being like, oh no, this can happen to us. Let's avoid them at all costs.
Okay, Leo. Okay. That was okay. All right, I'll give you that one. That was all right.
Hard ass on Leo. Come on.
Well, I mean, we're pretty much wrapping it up right now. Brendon, do you have any final thoughts as far as your research? Anything that you want our listeners to know about, if they want to get involved with Bigfoot, if they're looking to do their own research, what are some of your final thoughts on this topic?
That's a very good question, and it's a good note to end on. Is I might sound like a hard ass in the interview. It's only because I want people to come and investigate any mysterious thing, whether it's Bigfoot, whether it's UFOs, whether it's a Jolly Green Giant. It doesn't matter. Do your research, have fun, but don't buy the farm, right? Be smart enough to tell the difference between a hoax and a real, and don't be so gullible. If that's what you want to do, then call yourself a Bigfoot fan and read the books. That's fine. But if you're going to research, take 5 minutes to look a little bit deeper at what you're investigating, or maybe what you're watching on on YouTube, and say that, is this really being presented as a straight and narrow on the fence as far as impartial or without confirmation bias? Because confirmation bias clouds a lot of this community, and everything is presented, and everything's into clickbait and everything. Things were a lot simpler back before the internet as far as Bigfoot research went, because Bigfoot researchers actually had to go places and do their investigations, and then write the report on a typewriter and then submit it. So those people did real boots on the ground stuff. So maybe just welcome to the family, but just don't believe everything you see,
Thank you. I think you bring up a great point. That's great. Tristan and Leo, any final thoughts?
I've been pretty honest about the fact I don't believe in Bigfoot really at all. Just kind of the main point of the conversation, which you'd kind of said at the end, is if there's a body, I'm all willing to go back and really investigate what's going on and know where he is, his whole habitat, all those things. But yeah, that's really my big cutoff point. Until there is some identifiable body shoved in people's faces, I just don't believe it.
Yeah, and I'm open to the idea that he definitely, or it does exist, but it's just a matter of in what form, or if it's a physical flesh and blood, or if it's something beyond our comprehension. I don't know. Till we see something, concrete, that's we'll see.
Exactly, and that's a very, very good way to look at it both ways. Is I'm a fan of the project. I do want it to exist, but I'm not going to be sold a bill of goods unless I see a body. It would take me, for me to believe that it exists, I would have to see it during daylight at probably no less than 30 or 40 yards, and know that it exists. And then you would never get me to shut up about it.
I'd even want to give it a hug.
Exactly. I'll tackle the fucking thing. Let's go. Dragging you to the
lab. Brendon, thank you for coming on the show. We've covered a lot today in this episode. You have a Facebook page called The Collective, correct?
It's the Catskill Appalachian Research Collective. Yes, it's a mouthload, but
awesome. If you can link us with that too, we'll put it in our description so everyone can take a look at it.
I'm going to link you also right now.
Awesome, thank you. And you also have a documentary called The Devil's Road.
Yep.
Too. Correct?
We've got episode 1 of Devil's Road is out. It's that you can find on the YouTube channel, which is CARC Universal.
Awesome. And we'll link all this stuff in the description too, so our audience members can take a listen to this. If you enjoyed what you listened to, please check out our social media pages to stay up to date with the latest content and episodes that will be published. And stop by again next week for our most interesting stories, mysteries, and unexplained occurrences in this world. And remember, we aren't looking for things that are normal. We want stuff that's effing weird. Take care.
Ninja News Japan is a podcast. It's about news from Japan. Japanese news. There's no ninjas. If you're interested in the news, this is a good podcast. If you're interested in Japan, this is also a good podcast. If you're interested in ninjas, this is not a good podcast. It's a Japanese news podcast. It's a podcast about Japanese news. There's no ninjas.
Hey everyone, I am Chris.
And I'm Christine, and we do a podcast about life, love, and hot topics. We're family friendly.
Yeah, well, mostly.
And you can catch us every week.
So subscribe to the Chris and Christine Show on your favorite streaming service.
And buckle up, Buttercup, because you're in for some fun.
Some fun? Oh yeah, that sounds fantastic.